jobs were lost in 2020.
So this has South Africa's businesses say the further tightening of lockdown restrictions will hurt the economic recovery. Business Unity South Africa, the country's biggest business grouping, says South Africa can't afford a complete shutdown. Further measures to curb the spread of coronavirus need to take into account impact on the country's still fragile growth, it says. It continues to say that measures would need to take into account the impact on the country's still fragile growth. Martin Kingston is Vice President of Business Unity South Africa. He joins us now. Very good evening to you, and thank you so much for joining us, Martin. So let's just first start with just how bad can it get? It's necessary measures now, we're told, but internationally it's been predicted that there are further waves in the offing. I mean, we've seen India, Fitch saying that they face something in the region of a 5% slump in their economic growth. Japan seeing its worst post-war slump as well. So are we any better?
Well, good evening to you and your viewers. I think that we are in a better position, certainly, than we were last year. We learned a considerable amount from our experience since we went into hard lockdown at the end of March in 2020. The President and the government really had no option but to take us up to adjusted level 4. And I think we would endorse the comments that were made by the trade unions about the potential damage on the economy and the need to provide relief. Having said that, the quickest and most effective intervention to stop us going into further lockdowns is to aggressively and comprehensively roll out the vaccination program. We are already now in our 6th week of phase 2. It started on the 17th of May. And I think we're going to see that ramping up very quickly and very aggressively in the coming weeks. So I'm confident that we'll be able to see changes as a consequence of that. However, it's not going to address the very real challenges posed by the third wave. Hopefully a fourth and subsequent wave will be diminished as a consequence of the vaccination program. And therefore we need to consider what measures need to be taken by all parties to provide relief to the individuals and the businesses, particularly small and medium-sized businesses, that are likely to suffer as a consequence of going to adjusted level 4 if we stay there for any extended period of time.
So you as business business South Africa in general, you're saying that the private sector is more than equipped to speed up the nation's vaccination drive. How are you going to do that? Do you foresee being able to raise funds more quickly than government, for instance? And do you also see opportunities? I'm thinking rethinking supply chain already has been brought to the fore because of COVID-19. So will it help you diversify manufacturing networks, including production of vaccines themselves?
Well, there's no doubt that we're going to be able to reposition the economy in terms of localization, including the production of the vaccine in due course. It's not going to help us in the here and now of dealing with the third and fourth waves. I think that 2021 needs to depend upon imported vaccines, apart from those, of course, Johnson & Johnson, that are being manufactured by Aspen here in Chapera. The problem that we have, of course, has been threefold. The first has been access to the vaccine. When there's a contamination incident in the United States, which impacted upon J&J, there's little that we can do about that. We've now seen that the pipeline is actually very full for July, and we believe going forwards into the third quarter of this year, we should be able to ramp up that vaccination program very quickly. The second is having an adequate number of sites. We've already got 800 sites that are operationalized between the private and the public sector. But that's going to scale to probably 3,000 by the time that we get to the over 50s and over 40s. We already have capacity for 160,000 jabs a day. Last week, we were averaging 100,000 jabs a day. We think by the end of this week, we should be at 150,000. We want to get to 250,000 across the country by the end of July. The president is exhorting us to get to 300,000. That's over 7 million jabs a month. And the third is making sure that as many people as possible register, and then having registered, they turn up to get vaccinated. We know we've had an inadequate level of registration amongst the over 60s. That's now being opened up this month in July to the over 50s. I'm confident that in the next 2 weeks we'll see a sea change in the pace and indeed the scale of the vaccination program as it begins to unfold.
Martin, let's look at strengthening of public-private partnerships and the learning outcomes out of this. So we spoke about manufacturing and diversifying that network earlier on. Just how quick can we get into it? I know you say it's sort of mid and long-term way off, but surely there is something that we can glean from this crisis.
Oh, there is absolutely. When we went into level 5 lockdown last year, we discovered as a country how dependent we were on imported goods that could be manufactured locally. And perhaps the most specific example of that was PPE. People will remember that at the beginning of last year, almost all of our PPE, some 95% of it, was being imported from abroad, primarily but not only from China. And business alongside government and organized labor put together a local manufacturing partnership that looked at how we could pivot manufacturing capability in South Africa to start producing our own PPE. And indeed, in many of the lines of production, that is now being produced locally. By the same token, Business Unity South Africa has identified with government some 42 different products and sub-products across the entirety of the economy, with the aim of saving some 200 billion rand over a 5-year period that can be manufactured locally. We've identified champions who will lead for and on behalf of business, each and every one of those. It'll take time, again, to feed through, but we think that we'll start to see results manifesting before the end of this year and then starting to get traction next year and thereafter.
So from rebound to recovery, what should businesses, those that are obviously surviving, put in place to be ready, when we get to that stage? Obviously, everybody is feeling a little let down at the moment, seeing hopelessness, but there is a future.
Well, there is indeed a future, but we need to remember that there were decisions as a country we should have taken some years ago. Even if we took them, we didn't implement them. There are fundamental structural reforms that were required to ensure that we could enhance the ease of doing business. Some of those decisions now are already, of course, being taken, perhaps the most evident of it being the decision for raising the limit for embedded generation to 100 megawatts. We think that will indeed unleash very significant untapped demand from the private sector, both domestically and internationally. We also know that it's going to take us at least 3 years to recover to pre-COVID levels of GDP growth as a consequence of the contraction we experienced last year and inadequate levels of growth this year, although better than we were anticipating. So I think every company in South Africa, large and small, needs to invest not just for the short term, but for the medium and the longer term. There is no doubt that it is private capital that will act as a very significant spur to growth, as well as the creation of sustainable jobs, which is an absolute imperative, as I believe we all accept.
Thank you so much for speaking to us, Martin Kingston. He is Vice President, Business Unity South Africa. All right.